For 23 years, I carried a secret that could have destroyed the people who destroyed me first. Every morning, I looked in the mirror and saw the same 17-year-old girl who was thrown out of her home with nothing but the clothes on her back and a life growing inside her. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that the broken teenager they abandoned would one day hold their future in her hands. And when that day finally came, when they walked into my office desperate for work, they had no idea they were begging for mercy from the daughter they had erased from their lives. This is the story of how I turned my greatest shame into my greatest strength, and how silence became my most powerful weapon. If this story moves you, please hit the like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Your support helps me share these real stories that need to be told. I was 17 when my world shattered. It started with a conversation I never should have had to have, telling my parents about something serious that had happened to me. I thought they would protect me. I thought they would believe me. Instead, they looked at me like I was a stranger who had contaminated their perfect suburban home. "You're lying," my mother said, her voice so cold it felt like winter had settled in our living room. "You're making this up for attention." My father didn't even look at me. He just shook his head and walked away. But that wasn't the worst part. 3 weeks later, I had to tell them I was pregnant. I remember standing in that same living room, my hands shaking as I tried to find the words. The late afternoon sun was streaming through the windows, and for a moment I thought maybe the beauty of it would soften what I had to say. "I'm pregnant," I whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother's face twisted into something I had never seen before, pure disgust. "Get out," she said quietly. "Mom, please, get out of my house. Now." My father finally looked at me then, and what I saw in his eyes broke something inside me that I'm not sure ever fully healed. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was nothing. Like I had already ceased to exist. "You have 30 minutes to pack whatever you can carry," he said. "After that, you're no longer our daughter." I went upstairs and packed a single suitcase. I left behind everything: photo albums, stuffed animals, my diary, the college acceptance letter I would never use. I left behind my entire life and walked out into a world that suddenly felt impossibly vast and unforgiving. The first few months were the hardest. I stayed in a shelter for teenage mothers, sharing a room with 3 other girls who had their own stories of abandonment. The walls were thin, and at night I could hear them crying, just like I was crying. But there was something about those long, sleepless nights that taught me something crucial. I was stronger than I knew. Every morning, I woke up and made the choice to keep going. Every day, I looked at my growing belly and promised the baby inside that I would build a life worthy of her love. Yes, her. I somehow knew from the beginning that I was carrying a daughter. It was during my 7th month that I met Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived next to the shelter. She had worked in garment factories her entire life, and one day she saw me struggling to mend my only decent shirt. "You're doing it wrong," she said, but not unkindly. "Come up here. Let me show you." That was the beginning of everything. Mrs. Chen taught me how to sew, how to see possibility where others saw only discarded material. "Sewing is like life," she told me. "You take whatever fabric you have, even if it's damaged, and you make something beautiful." When Isabella was born, Mrs. Chen was in the hospital waiting room. She was the first person to hold my daughter after me, and when she looked into that tiny face, she smiled wider than I had ever seen her smile. "She's going to be strong like her mother," she said. "I can see it in her eyes." If you're still watching, please subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Your support means everything to me. The next few years were a blur of night feedings and day jobs. I worked at a dry cleaner during the day and sewed alterations for extra money in the evenings. Mrs. Chen watched Isabella while I worked, and slowly, something that felt like family began to form around us. It was Mrs. Chen who suggested I try selling my work at the local farmers market. I was hesitant. Who would want to buy clothes made by a teenage mother? But she believed in me with a fierce certainty. "You have a gift," she said. "Don't waste it being afraid." That first day at the market, I made $43. It might not sound like much, but to me, it felt like winning the lottery. It was the first money I had ever earned doing something I loved. The market became my weekend ritual. Isabella would play behind my table, and customers would stop to admire her as much as my clothes. She was growing into a bright, curious child, and she had a way of making everyone smile. It was at the market that I met Rosa, a woman in her 50s who had lost her husband and was struggling with her jewelry business. We struck up a friendship based on our shared understanding of what it meant to build something from nothing. "What if we joined forces?" she said one Saturday. "I have a small storefront I can barely afford, and you have skills that could fill it with something beautiful." The idea terrified me, but it also meant possibility on a scale I had never imagined. We spent weeks planning, dreaming. Rosa would handle jewelry and accessories, and I would focus on clothing and alterations. We called it Second Chances, and it became exactly that for both of us. The first few months were challenging. There were days when we barely made enough to cover rent, but there were also days when the shop felt like it was humming with energy, when I would catch Rosa and myself grinning at each other because we couldn't believe what we were building. Isabella was now 4 years old, and she treated the shop like her second home. She would sit in the corner with her coloring books, chattering away to customers who seemed delighted by her presence. She had no idea that her mother had ever been anything other than a successful businesswoman. If this story is resonating with you, please hit the subscribe button. I share these real-life experiences because I believe in the power of perseverance. As the years passed, the shop grew. We expanded, hired employees, and I started designing more of my own pieces. Isabella was now 8, helping around the shop after school and charming everyone who walked through the door. But success brought its own challenges. The more visible I became, the more I worried about running into people from my past. The first time it happened, I was at the grocery store when my old high school Spanish teacher approached me. "Don't I know you from somewhere?" she asked. "I don't think so," I said calmly. "I'm Maria Santos. I own Second Chances downtown." She looked confused, then smiled apologetically. "I must be mistaken." As she walked away, I realized something profound had happened. I hadn't lied to her. I had become Maria Santos, successful businesswoman and devoted mother. The scared 17-year-old was still part of me, but she was no longer all of me. By the time Isabella turned 12, Second Chances had become one of the most successful boutiques in our area. We had moved to a larger location, expanded our inventory, and I had a staff of 8 employees. I had started a small manufacturing operation, creating my own line sold in boutiques across 3 states. But the real triumph wasn't financial. It was the life I had built for my daughter. She was confident, loved, surrounded by people who cared about her. She never doubted for a second that she was wanted and valued. The shop continued to grow. By Isabella's 15th birthday, we were employing 15 people. I had become a recognized figure in the business community, attending Chamber of Commerce meetings and industry conferences. With each public appearance, I felt more confident, but also more exposed. The possibility of encountering my parents became more real with each passing year. I had heard they had both lost their jobs during the economic downturn and were struggling to find work. Isabella was now 16, and she had grown into a remarkable young woman. She was intelligent, compassionate, and had a natural talent for both design and business. "Mom," she said one evening, "I want to go to fashion school after high school, then come back and help you expand the business." The pride I felt was overwhelming. My daughter had dreams, ambitions, and the confidence to pursue them. It was around this time that I decided to incorporate and expand even further. I hired a business consultant who suggested I consider hiring experienced retail managers. "You've built something incredible," he told me. But to take it to the next level, you need people with specific expertise. That's when I decided to post job openings for several management positions. The response was overwhelming. Over 200 applications for 5 positions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this journey so far. Please share your perspective in the comments. I spent weeks reviewing resumes and conducting interviews. Most candidates were exactly what I expected: experienced retail professionals. But there were also surprises. People who had been out of work for extended periods, older workers struggling to find employment. I found myself drawn to these unconventional candidates, maybe because I understood what it felt like to be underestimated. I ended up hiring 3 people who might have been overlooked by other employers. The hiring process took almost 2 months. By the end, I thought I had seen every possible type of job seeker, which is why I was completely unprepared for what happened on a Thursday morning in late September. I was in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked. "Maria, your 10 o'clock appointment is here for the assistant manager interview." "Great, send them in." The door opened, and 2 people walked into my office. An older man and woman, both probably in their early 60s, dressed in clothes that had seen better days but were clean and pressed. They looked nervous, hopeful, and desperate. It took me exactly 3 seconds to realize who they were. My parents. They had aged, of course. My father's hair was completely gray, and my mother looked smaller, more fragile. But there was no mistaking them. These were the people who had thrown me out 17 years ago, who had told me I was no longer their daughter, and they had no idea who I was. I sat there behind my desk, my heart pounding, and watched them settle into the chairs across from me. They were looking at me with the polite attention of job seekers, nothing more. "Thank you for seeing us," my father said. "We're very interested in the assistant manager position." "We both have retail experience," my mother added, "and we really need this opportunity." I realized I needed to say something. "Tell me about your experience," I managed to say, my voice remarkably steady. They launched into their prepared pitch. My father talked about his construction background and team management skills. My mother described her secretarial work and attention to detail. They were both trying so hard to impress me, to convince me they deserved a chance. As they spoke, I studied their faces, looking for any sign of recognition. But there was nothing. I had changed, of course. I was no longer the scared teenager they had thrown away. I was a successful businesswoman using my middle name, Santos. But more than that, I realized they weren't seeing me because they had never really seen me. Even when I was their daughter, I had been more of an idea than a person. They had loved the version of me that fit their expectations, but when I became complicated, they had been able to discard me because I had never been fully real to them. "We heard that you're a fair employer," my mother was saying, "that you give people second chances." The irony was almost too much to bear. Second chances. That was the name of my shop, the philosophy I had built my business on. I had given second chances to countless people over the years, but I had never imagined I would be asked to give one to the people who had refused to give me a first one. Please let me know in the comments what you think I should have done in this situation. Your perspectives help me think through these difficult moments. The interview continued for 20 minutes. They answered questions about availability, salary expectations, and teamwork. They were polite, professional, and completely oblivious to the fact that they were interviewing with the daughter they had abandoned. As it wound down, I found myself facing a decision I had never anticipated. I could reveal who I was, could watch their faces as they realized the successful businesswoman they were begging for work was the pregnant teenager they had thrown away. Or I could hire them without ever telling them who I was. There was also a third option. I could simply not hire them and never deal with this situation at all. But as I looked at them, I saw something that surprised me. They weren't the powerful figures from my childhood anymore. They were just 2 older people who had made terrible choices and were now struggling with the consequences. They looked tired, worried, and humbled. We'll be in touch, I told them. We should have a decision by early next week. They thanked me profusely and left my office without ever knowing they had just interviewed with their daughter. I sat alone for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. 17 years of building a life, of creating success, and it had all led to this moment. That evening, I called Rosa and told her what had happened. "They don't know who you are?" she asked, incredulous. "No idea," I said. "So what are you going to do?" I thought about it for 3 days. I went through all the motions of running my business, but my mind kept returning to that moment when they walked into my office. On Sunday evening, I made my decision. I called them both and offered them the job. Not because I forgave them. I wasn't sure I was capable of that yet. Not because I wanted them back in my life. I had built a good life without them. But because I had learned something about the difference between justice and revenge, between strength and cruelty. They were thrilled. They thanked me over and over, promised they wouldn't let me down. I told them they could begin the following Monday. "You won't regret this," my father said. "We're going to work harder than anyone you've ever hired." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I had just closed a circle that had been open for 17 years. If you're still with me, please take a moment to like this video. These stories aren't easy to tell, but I believe they're important to share. The next morning, I called Isabella into my office. She was now 17, old enough to understand complicated family dynamics. "I need to tell you something," I said, "and I need you to hear it from me." I told her about my parents, about what had happened when I was 17, about the interview, and about my decision to hire them. I watched her process this information, saw the anger flash in her eyes, saw the confusion. "Are you going to tell them who you are?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I'm taking this one day at a time." "Do you want me to meet them?" This was the question I had been dreading. Of course, she was curious about these people who were technically her grandparents, but had never been part of her life. "Only if you want to," I said. "And only when you're ready," she nodded, working through the implications. "I'm proud of you," she said finally, "for everything you've built and for the choice you're making now." My parents started work the following Monday. I watched from my office window as they arrived, 15 minutes early, dressed in their best clothes and carrying nervous energy. The first few weeks were surreal. I would watch them work, see them interact with customers, hear them talking about their gratitude for this opportunity. They were good employees, punctual, hardworking, eager to learn. But it was the little things that got to me. The way my father drummed his fingers when thinking, the way my mother tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. These were the people who had raised me for 17 years, and yet they were also strangers. One afternoon, about a month after they started, I heard my mother talking to a customer about a dress alteration. "My daughter used to sew," she was saying. "She was very talented, but—" Her voice trailed off. In that pause, I heard something I hadn't expected. Regret. As the months passed, I found myself observing my parents' lives from a distance. They were clearly struggling financially, and they were also lonely. They didn't seem to have many friends or family members. The strangest part was watching them interact with Isabella. She had decided she wanted to meet them, not as their granddaughter, but as the owner's daughter who sometimes helped around the shop. She introduced herself simply as Isabella, and they took to her immediately. "She's a lovely girl," my mother said to me one day. "You've raised her well." If only she knew. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this complex situation. Please share your perspective in the comments. About 6 months after they started working for me, something happened that changed everything. It was a busy Saturday when a woman came in looking for a dress for her daughter's wedding. She was clearly emotional, talking about how excited she was to be part of this milestone. I was helping her when I heard my mother's voice behind me. I understand how you feel, she was saying to another customer. I had a daughter once, and I always dreamed of helping her pick out her wedding dress. But we made some mistakes and now she's gone. I froze. The dress I was holding slipped from my hands. I'm sorry, the customer said kindly. That must be very difficult. It is, my mother replied. Not a day goes by that I don't think about her and wonder if she's okay, if she's happy, if she knows that we… She stopped herself, struggling with emotion. I stood there, holding that wedding dress, and felt 17 years of carefully constructed walls start to crumble. Because in that moment, I realized that my parents had been carrying their own burden all these years. They had been living with the consequences of their choices, just like I had. That didn't excuse what they had done, but it did complicate my understanding of who they were and what they had been living with. I excused myself and went to the back room, where I cried for the first time in months. I cried for the 17-year-old who had needed her parents and been abandoned. I cried for the woman I had become, who had built something beautiful from that abandonment. And I cried for the people my parents had become, who were clearly living with regret but didn't know how to fix what they had broken. When I came back out, my mother was at the register. She looked up at me with concern. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." But I wasn't fine. I was standing at another crossroads, facing another decision that would define everyone's future. It was on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, almost a year after they had started working for me, that I finally made my decision. I was in my office when I heard familiar laughter. I looked up to see Isabella teaching my mother how to steam a delicate fabric, and my mother was laughing at something Isabella had said. In that moment, watching my daughter and my mother together, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about Isabella, about the family connections she had never known, about the possibility of healing that could extend beyond my own wounds. I stood up from my desk and walked out onto the shop floor. "Mom, Dad," I said quietly, using words I hadn't spoken in 17 years. "Could I speak with you both in my office?" They looked up, surprised. Had they done something wrong? "Of course," my father said. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. "I just need to talk to you about something important." They followed me into my office, and I closed the door behind us. Isabella had noticed the tension and was watching through the glass window. I caught her eye and nodded slightly. She understood that this was the moment we had been building toward. I turned to face my parents, who were sitting in the same chairs where they had interviewed a year ago. "I need to tell you something," I began. "And I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything." They nodded, their faces showing polite attention. 17 years ago, you had a daughter who came to you when she was in trouble. She was scared, she was pregnant, and she needed her parents more than she had ever needed them before. And you threw her away. I watched their faces change as the words sank in. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, and my father's eyes widened with recognition. You told her she was no longer your daughter. You gave her 30 minutes to pack her life into a suitcase and turned your backs on her when she needed you most. My mother started to stand, but I held up my hand. I said listen to the whole thing. She sat back down, tears already streaming down her face. That daughter survived. She lived in a shelter, worked multiple jobs, learned to build something from nothing. She found people who believed in her when her own parents wouldn't. She raised a beautiful daughter who has never doubted she was wanted and loved. My father was staring at me now, his face pale with shock. That daughter built a business from a single table at a farmer's market. She employed people, contributed to her community, and created something beautiful out of the scraps you left her with. I paused, taking a breath, feeling the weight of 17 years of silence finally lifting. I am that daughter. I am Maria Santos, but I was born Maria Elena Rodriguez. I am the pregnant teenager you abandoned, and I am the woman who has been paying your salary for the past year." The silence was deafening. My mother was crying openly, and my father looked like he might be sick. "The girl you see out there," I continued, gesturing toward Isabella, "is your granddaughter. She's 17 years old, she's brilliant, she's kind, and she has never known grandparents because you chose to reject her existence before she was even born. Thank you for staying with me through this incredible journey. If this story has moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about resilience and second chances." My mother finally found her voice. "Maria," she whispered. "Oh my God, Maria." "Why?" my father asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you hire us?" "Because I needed to know who you really were," I said. "I needed to see if you were the same people who could throw away their child, or if you had learned something about kindness and second chances." "And?" my mother asked through her tears. "And you've been good employees. You've been kind to customers and grateful for the opportunity. You've shown that you're capable of being decent people, which makes what you did to me all the more painful." "We made a mistake," my father said, standing up. "We were scared, we were angry." "You didn't make a mistake," I interrupted. "You made a choice. You chose to protect your reputation over your daughter. You chose your own comfort over your child's welfare." "We know that now," my mother said. "We've regretted it every single day." "Then why didn't you try to find me?" "We didn't know how," my father said. "We didn't know where you were, and we were ashamed." "You were ashamed. Do you know what I was?" "I was 17 and pregnant, and homeless. I was terrified and alone and convinced that I was as worthless as you made me feel." The three of us sat in silence, the weight of 17 years of separation hanging between us. "Can you ever forgive us?" my mother asked. It was the question I had been dreading and anticipating. Could I forgive them? Did I want to? "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive you, and I don't know if I want to. But I know that I don't want to carry this anger anymore. It's been heavy, and I'm tired of letting what you did define who I am." "What does that mean?" my father asked. "It means that I'm willing to try to move forward, not backward. We can never go back, but forward, to something new. Something that acknowledges what happened but doesn't let it destroy what could be." "And Isabella?" my mother asked. I looked through the window at Isabella, who was pretending to organize while obviously trying to overhear our conversation. "That's up to her," I said. "She knows who you are now. She knows what you did, and she knows that you're here. If she wants to get to know you, that's her choice. But it will be on her terms, not yours." "We've lost so much," my mother said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "You have, and so have I, and so has Isabella. We've all lost the family we could have been." "Is there any chance we could try to build something new?" my father asked. I considered his question carefully. "I don't know, but I'm willing to find out, under certain conditions." "What conditions?" "First, you acknowledge what you did. Not that you made a mistake, but that you abandoned your daughter when she needed you most. You own that completely." They both nodded. "Second, you understand that earning your way back into our lives is a privilege you'll have to earn every day through your actions, not your words." "We understand," my father said. "And finally, you understand that this is not about you. It's not about your guilt or your regret. It's about Isabella and me and what we need to heal and move forward." "We'll do whatever it takes," my mother said. "We'll spend the rest of our lives trying to make up for what we did." "You can't make up for it," I said. "What's done is done. But you can choose to be different people going forward." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Isabella. "I need to talk to Isabella," I said. "And then, if she's willing, maybe we can all figure out what comes next." I opened the office door and called Isabella over. She approached cautiously. "Mom?" she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," I said. "Better than okay." I told them who I am. She nodded, then looked at my parents with curiosity and caution. "So you're my grandparents," she said. "Yes," my mother said quietly. "We are. The ones who threw my mom out when she was pregnant with me." "Yes," my father said. "We did that, and we're sorry." Isabella studied them for a moment. "Being sorry doesn't fix what you did," she said finally. "But it's a start." Please share your thoughts about Isabella's response in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way forward. The next few months were tentative and awkward. My parents continued to work at the shop, and Isabella began having short conversations with them, asking questions about their lives, their interests, their regrets. She was cautious but fair, giving them opportunities to show who they were now. One evening, Isabella came to me with a request. "I want to have dinner with them," she said. "Just the four of us. I want to hear their story, and I want them to hear mine." So we arranged dinner the following Sunday. It was the first time my parents had been in my home, the first time they had seen the life I had built. The dinner was awkward at first, but gradually became more real as Isabella began asking questions. "Tell me about my mom when she was my age," Isabella said. "She was a lot like you," my mother said carefully. "Smart, creative, independent." "Then why did you throw her away?" Isabella asked directly. "Because we were scared," my father said finally. "We were scared of what people would think, scared of how hard it would be, scared of changing our comfortable lives." "So you chose comfort over your daughter," Isabella said. "Yes," my mother said quietly. "We did. And it was the worst decision we ever made." "What would you do differently?" Isabella asked. "Everything," my father said. "We would have supported her, helped her, loved her through it. We would have been there for you too. But you can't go back and change it." "No," my mother said. "We can't. All we can do is try to be better now." "Are you going to be better?" Isabella asked. "We're going to try," my father said. "Every day we're going to try to be the kind of people who deserve to be in your lives." As my parents were leaving, my mother stopped at the door. "Thank you," she said to me, "for giving us this chance." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "This is just the beginning." Over the following year, something remarkable began to happen. Slowly, carefully, we began to build something that resembled a family. Not the traditional family we had once been, but something new, something stronger because it was built on honesty and choice rather than obligation. My parents proved themselves day after day. They worked hard, respected my boundaries, and gradually earned Isabella's trust. They didn't try to rush the process or demand forgiveness they hadn't earned. They simply showed up, consistently and humbly. Isabella, with her inherited wisdom and resilience, gave them opportunities while never forgetting the lessons of their past failures. She was warm but cautious, loving but protected. And me? I found myself letting go of anger I had carried for so long that I had forgotten how heavy it was. Not because my parents deserved forgiveness, but because I deserved peace. 2 years after that day in my office, we were gathered for Isabella's 19th birthday. She had been accepted to fashion school and was preparing for her next chapter. "I have an announcement," Isabella said, raising her glass. "I've decided what I want to do after fashion school." We all looked at her expectantly. "I want to come back and expand the business. I want to add a program that helps young mothers learn job skills and provides the support they need to build stable lives." I felt tears spring to my eyes. My daughter had taken the pain of my story and turned it into a vision for helping others. "It would be called Second Chances," she continued, "and it would be our way of making sure that what happened to Mom never happens to anyone else if we can help it." My parents were crying too. understanding that their granddaughter had found a way to transform their failure into something beautiful. "We'd like to help, if you'll let us," my mother said. Isabella looked at me, and I nodded. "I think that would be perfect," Isabella said. "Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. If this story has moved you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. As I look back on that day when my parents walked into my office, I realized that it wasn't just them asking for a second chance. It was all of us, asking for the chance to write a different ending to our story. The scared 17-year-old who had been thrown away had become a woman who could offer employment to the people who had abandoned her. The parents who had chosen fear over love had become grandparents who chose courage over comfort. The daughter who had never known her grandparents had become the bridge between past pain and future healing. We didn't get our happily ever after. We got something better. We got our choice to begin again. And sometimes, that's the most powerful ending of all. If you believe in the power of second chances, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about resilience, forgiveness, and the families we choose to build. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.